Friends, in preparing for this year's Mother's Day service, or Mothering Sunday as it is more traditionally called, I was quite intrigued to see that the origins of Mothering Sunday go back much earlier than the American Mother's Day, which officially started in 1914. Now, Mothering Sunday in the UK goes right back to the medieval period. As early as the 8th century AD, in the readings for the Catholic Mass for the fourth Sunday of Lent, there were a number of references to the theme of mothers. The introit was largely taken from Isaiah 66 and makes reference to the city of Jerusalem as a mother who suckles her children. It reads as follows: "Rejoice with Jerusalem and be glad for her, all you who love her. Rejoice greatly with her, all you who mourn over her. For you will nurse and be satisfied at her comforting breasts. You will drink deeply and delight in her overflowing abundance." Then the epistle reading that was set for that day was from Galatians 4, which makes reference to two mothers, Hagar and Sarah, comparing the slave Hagar to the earthly Jerusalem, who is described as being in slavery with her children, and then contrasting that with Abraham's wife, Sarah, who stood as a symbol of the heavenly Jerusalem, as the true mother of all Christians, who have been born into freedom through Christ. And so Sarah and the heavenly Jerusalem are used by Paul as symbols of the church. The key verse was verse 26, but the Jerusalem that is above is free, and she is our mother. And then thirdly, on that day, the gospel reading that was set was the feeding of the 5,000 from John chapter 2. And in that passage, it could be said that Jesus plays a kind of a mothering role. Like a mother, he feeds all his children with the gifts of bread and fish from Mother Earth. And so with these readings that all contained mothering themes, the fourth Sunday of Lent became associated with mothering, but more in a spiritual sense than in an earthly sense, with the church being understood as the spiritual mother of all Christians. Inspired then also by the words of Psalm 122 verse 1, which were also contained in the introit for the day, which read, "I was glad when they said to me, we will go into the house of the Lord," it became the tradition on this Sunday to travel to the mother church of the area, which was normally the cathedral where the bishop sat, or if that wasn't possible, to go to the church where one was baptized, where one had first been received as a child of Mother Church and nurtured from that time on by the sacraments. Now apparently these many pilgrimages in the middle of Lent to the Mother Church or the cathedral could get a little out of hand, because the fourth Sunday of Lent was also midway through Lent. It was that Sunday when the Lenten fast would be temporarily broken, and so there would be a bit of feasting and celebrating on this day before getting back to the hard work of fasting the following day. And apparently this could all descend into brawls and fighting. In a letter written by a church leader at the time, instructions were given to clergy to strictly prohibit one parish from fighting with another over whose banners should come first in the processions, and that those who dishonor their spiritual mother in this way should not escape punishment. Now, interestingly, in France, also on the fourth Sunday of Lent, they have the Mid-Lenten Women's Carnival, and that this tradition also goes back to that common tradition in the medieval period. This practice of visiting the Mother Church on the fourth Sunday of Lent continued after the Reformation in England right into the mid-1600s, possibly a bit beyond that. And anyone who did this was commonly described as having gone mothering. Because the day was a holiday, in other words, a holy day, Domestic servants might have been given some time off, during which they may have chosen to visit their families, which indeed might have included their flesh and blood mothers. Now, at some point, this tradition fell out of practice. But in the early 1900s, in response to the creation of Mother's Day in the United States by Anna Jarvis, in the United Kingdom, Constance Adelaide Smith, who was a High Church Anglican, began a movement to revive the traditions of Mothering Sunday. And she wrote 3 important works under her maiden name, Constance Penswick Smith. Firstly, a short play entitled In Praise of Mother, a story of Mothering Sunday. That was in 1913. Secondly, 2 years later, she wrote a short history of Mothering Sunday. And thirdly, in 1921, she wrote her most influential booklet entitled The Revival of Mothering Sunday. In this book, she wrote 4 short chapters outlining the different aspects of motherhood that she believed should be honored on the day. Firstly, the church, our mother. Secondly, mothers of earthly homes. Thirdly, the mother of Jesus. And then fourthly, the gifts of Mother Earth. Ellen Hawley writes that the idea caught on like fire at the end of World War I, according to one source, because of the country's many losses in the war. She writes this doesn't entirely make sense because it was young men who died in the war, not mothers. But as she says, grief is a funny thing, and it will pour itself into any container it can find. She says that by 1938 or so, Mothering Sunday was now celebrated in every parish across Britain and every country across the empire. And so, if truth be told, the earliest origins of Mothering Sunday were not really about honouring one's earthly mothers at all. But since the 1950s, Mothering Sunday in the United Kingdom has become more and more secularized and commercialized, following the tradition of the American Mother's Day. It has also become known more and more as Mother's Day rather than Mothering Sunday, losing its religious significance and becoming more of a secular observance of the celebration of earthly motherhood. In closing, the concept of the church as a mother is quite a compelling one. Not the church as a hierarchy, as perhaps in the Roman Catholic institution or even the Anglican institution, but rather the church as a community. In what way has church been like a mother to you? Perhaps this church or the church that you grew up. In what way has it nurtured you, or did it do so in the past? Perhaps it was indeed another church or another Christian community. If I think back to the church in Pinetown where I grew up, the church community in my memory was indeed like a mother, like a mothering presence, a community that helped nurture me as I grew through my childhood and perhaps most especially through my teens and into my 20s. In what way has the church been like a nurturing mother in your growing up? And lastly, what memories do you have of your own mothers at church? When I asked Wendy, she said that her memory of going to meetings, as they call them with her mum, is of having imperial mints. She said she only had imperial mints at the meeting, which was normally 2 hours long, and halfway through, after the first hour, her mum would slip her an imperial mint as a kind of reward and perhaps also as a bit of sustenance to get through the second hour. What are your memories, perhaps, of going to church with your mother? What are the ways in which your mother nurtured your faith or inspired you in some way to become the best human being you can be. May God bless you. Amen.